So thank you so much, and a true inspiration, and congratulations. My goodness.
Thank you very much.
Hey, we're really glad you're here with us today. We would now like to be able to turn it over to Rochelle Trottenberg, who is a youth organizer with Humboldt County Transition Age Youth Collaboration. Rochelle, again, thank you for making the trek down, and we're grateful that you're here.
Good evening. My name is Rochelle Trottenberg, and I am the lead youth organizer for HCTC, or the Humboldt County Transition Age Youth Collaboration. And I'm a former foster youth that experienced the unfortunate side effects of too many medications that I was on for way too long, and that were prescribed without other psychosocial interventions and without my voice being included in the process or being able to give consent. While I was on medication, I experienced many adverse side effects, including weight gain, lethargy, and tardive dyskinesia, as well as tremors that still haven't gone away today. However, it was not until years after leaving foster care that other aspects of healing and mental wellness were provided. Medications are not the silver bullet. They're not a long-term solution, and they should not be provided without a broader array of services. I hope that we can work together to transform this system and support the funding of preventative models that keep children from needing costly and powerful psychotropic medications. I'm going to ask you to put yourself in my shoes and the shoes of foster youth for just a minute. We've been removed from our parents due to abuse, neglect, sexual abuse, violence. Now we're living with strangers. We're in a new school, we're in a new neighborhood. Perhaps we've switched schools and homes several times within short periods of time. This is the life of a child in foster care. We feel lost, alone, sad, and are trying to make sense of chaos all around us, which we have little to no control over. Medications alone aren't the answer, and again, should only be used as a last resort and in conjunction with other prevention and intervention efforts, as well as monitoring and oversight. So I just talked about what it may be like to walk in our shoes, but this applies to your life as well. I want to stop and ask you to think about a time in your life when you went through a major transition or a major loss. What did you do to take care of yourself during those times? What would you do to help take care of your children during those times? The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have identified 5 social determinants of mental health: safe housing, safe neighborhoods, equitable jobs and wages, quality education, and access to quality health care. When a foster youth has access to these 5 things, it has the potential to enhance their emotional, psychological, and social well-being, and the ability to be resilient in overcoming the trauma and loss that so many of us foster youth have been suffering from. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration defines wellness not as the absence of disease or illness or stress, but the presence of purpose in life, active involvement in satisfying work and play, joyful relationships, a healthy body and living environment, and happiness. So what does this mean for children in foster care? We should be asking, are youth getting a quality education? Are youth living in safe environments that reduce stress and re-traumatization? Are children getting to participate in spiritual and cultural activities? Do they have strong bonds and connections to loving and supportive adults? Are youth getting access to nutritious food and given the opportunities to exercise and play? If we're answering no to any of these questions, perhaps medication should not be our answer. It means that we should require that children in foster care get to participate in age and developmentally appropriate extracurricular, enrichment, cultural, and social activities. The best prevention efforts can dramatically improve the overall mental wellness of children in foster care. Again, the World Health Organization has defined mental health as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes their own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to their community. Psychotropic and medications alone will not help foster youth actualize this definition. Instead, we need to put our efforts into promoting prevention models that prioritize and enhance those social determinants of mental health I just spoke about. The Humboldt County Transition Age Youth Collaboration is one such intervention. We're all about youth voice and engagement. We work with youth ages 16 to 26 who have lived experience with foster care, mental health, juvenile justice, and homelessness. We work together to improve systems and services that support the positive development of young people. We believe that healing can come through the participation in advocacy opportunities. We help youth develop those skills and the leadership so that they can effectively advocate for their rights and their voice within the system and other systems that serve them for the purpose of empowering youth to be equal partners in the process of change. We believe that by having youth involved at every level of decision-making, that systems will be better able to operate effective, responsive, and youth-informed systems of care. Youth-centered programs and practices are a best practice and will yield better outcomes. When we let youth lead us, they can guide us to the path of wellness. I want to thank you for taking the time to address this important issue. You have the opportunity this year to be a legislator that champions transformations in children's mental health and child welfare. Over the next several months, you will hear the opinions from a lot of people on this topic, but I ask you to remember that those are paid voices, and that the only voice that speaks from the heart is the foster youth's voice. So I urge you to remember our voice and let it resonate with you in all your decision-making. I ask you to stand strong and to remember the voices of foster youth you hear today, and to leave a legacy of a legislature that did the right thing for foster children. Thank you.
Michelle, you did a great job. Absolutely, please. Did a great job and spoke from the heart. So very grateful. I know all of us are. Thank you so much. My goodness. I would now like to be able to introduce Tony DeMarco. She is the Clinical Services Manager for Behavioral Health and Recovery from San Mateo County Mental Health, and we're grateful that you're here today and spending so much time with us, and welcome.
I'm very glad to be here today, to be invited to be a part of this conversation. I'm a clinician by profession, have moved up in the mental health system now as a Clinical Services Manager. And in San Mateo County, in our youth system, I oversee our juvenile probation, child welfare, and 0 to 5 prenatal 0 to 5 teams. I'm also the point person in our system for our KDA implementation, and have been very much involved in that process. So for the 17 years of my career with the county, I've worked very closely with child welfare and juvenile probation, and have watched many, many young people, too many young people, come through our systems with all the same stories that you've been hearing today. And I found myself oftentimes, because my basic training was in crisis work and as a trauma therapist, and have worked with a number of both youth and adult survivors, I knew we had a long way to go in our systems to really be better addressing the issues of youth in general, just from a developmental perspective, but also to start talking about the place and impact of trauma in what we were seeing in our systems with the young people that we were working with, because until just a few years ago, it really wasn't a topic of conversation as a system. And now we have a lot of conversations about being a trauma-informed system of care, which San Mateo County's been working very diligently on for about the last 8 years. I'm a part of our learning collaborative there. I do a lot of training in our county around trauma issues. And through that work, I was able to go to a conference a couple of years ago and listen to Dr. Bruce Perry from Texas. And it took everything I knew as a clinician, as a trauma therapist, and basically turned it on its head. And it kind of lit a fire for me in terms of understanding what I'd seen for so many years in the work that I was doing and in my own recovery, and helped me understand it from a very different perspective, and really filled in a lot of the gaps of what we were missing. And that was my biggest question, is watching kids go through our system, and I kept asking myself, what are we missing? Why are so many kids basically graduating out of our system and ending up in our adult system? And this gave me a lot of answers, and it kind of lit a fire. So I came back to my county and started on my campaign of bringing the neurosequential model of therapeutics to San Mateo County. So I was asked to come here today to talk to you about NMT. Our county has been working on this. We're now going into our 3rd year of studying and working with Bruce Perry and the Child Trauma Academy out of Houston, Texas. In the 3 years that we've been doing this, we were able to draw down Mental Health Services Act money for the first 2 years of training. We trained 38 staff in our youth system, including a number of staff from some of our community-based organizations that we partner and contract with because we wanted it to be a regional approach. And we had staff from our 0 to 5 team all the way up to our transitional age youth team, so across our whole system, trained for a year in the NMT functional assessment tool. To say that NMT is an assessment is really to sell it short. It is really a philosophy. It's a way of understanding anyone's behavior through the lens of their neurodevelopment and understanding the role that trauma and neglect and severe stress played in that development. It also calls for us to do our services in a very different way. And that was what was so exciting to me as a clinician. For so many years, all we've been told is the best evidence practice is all of the cognitive behavioral therapy that we've been asked to implement in our systems that frankly don't work very well. And they don't work because they're really aimed at the thinking part of the brain. And when you understand what happens to a child's developing system when they're under stress and duress and trauma, you will understand that that part of the brain is really not the part that's going to help them heal. Where you need to start is with relationship, with activities, with sensory somatic interventions that help that person's neurological system heal so that they can learn how to self-regulate, so that they can benefit from the other kinds of treatments that we're doing. And when we find in our 3rd year now where we're teaching this locally, as we're doing these different kinds of interventions, kids are learning how to self-regulate on their own, and their need for psychotropic medication starts to go away, just like the symptoms start to go away. Not completely, but it's a whole lot better than what we had before. And so we are I think the only large public health system to be implementing NMT the way that we are. This last June, we were invited to Canada to present at the symposium there because of the way that we're doing it in San Mateo County. And so in our 3rd year, we have 9 trainers. We've got a 3-level training program that we're rolling out in our county that's including our probation officers, our social workers, our public health nurses, in addition to our clinicians. We're looking at ways that it might have some implication to our adult system.
Mr. Mark, I don't mean to interrupt, and we're just going to have to wrap it up if you have another minute, and love hearing about the model program, but please finish up and you have about a minute.
I think the only thing I would want to say is that it really does, as you've all been asking questions about this and interested in alternatives, the kinds of interventions that we've learned to do with kids are not the ones that Medi-Cal pay for. So we've actually had, I was given a fund through our local Measure A dollars, which was a tax in San Mateo County. And I've spent this last year purchasing services like occupational therapy, speech and language, drumming, yoga, swimming, you know, a number of alternative, what would be considered alternative resources that Medi-Cal doesn't pay for so that we can actually get kids to the services that they're benefiting from, in addition to standard mental health services.
Thank you so much. And again, I apologize. I'm not trying to be pushy.
It's okay.
My goodness. I'm just so grateful you're here. Thank you very much. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would like to be able to introduce Ken Barrick. He's the Executive Director of Syndicate Family of Agencies, and Mr. Barrick is going to be giving us this testimony. Thank you, sir, for being here.
Thanks for having me, and I very much appreciate the chance to talk to you all about this. Senator Hancock asked for 5 solutions, and she's my senator, so I'm under a little bit of pressure to perform here. And I've come before this body a number of times where if you asked me for 5 solutions, I would have said these are complex issues, I don't know, but here are some ideas and here's the problem. This is not one of those situations. The great pleasure of being in this seat right now is that we know what to do. and there are solutions to this, and we're clear about it, and it's just a matter of will, political will, social will, for us to implement these solutions. We know what to do. So just to give you a sense, for over 20 years, Seneca, we started with a residential treatment program that worked with kids aged 6 to 12. And this was, we called it above level 14. This was the facility for those kids who had been failed by every system time and time and time again. And they came in on medication cocktails that would be stunning and shocking to everyone in this room. And that was partly because no one knew what to do, because they were coming from places with staff-to-child ratios of 1 to 5, 1 to 6, even 1 to 4 in the very best. And we made a decision that we were going to provide the level of service that it took to serve those kids. And we did that with extraordinary commitments from a series of partner counties that felt strongly about it with us. So we did it basically with a 1-to-1 staff-to-child ratio. And we took every one of those children off medication. Every one. Because these were not kids who were coming in with psychotic process, even though they had been diagnosed with psychotic process. I don't think in the years we ran that program, we ever saw a kid who later in life was diagnosed with psychosis. These were profoundly traumatized kids. 3 years later, 90% of those kids were still off medication. So this was not take them off and put them back on. This was provide the level of support that's necessary, and you hear this time and time again, to help the kids get through those things that brought them there. So what are the things that bring kids to us? There are really 3 things. The first is anxiety, and when you look at that anxiety, it's caused by trauma, and it's caused by unpredictable living arrangements that are disrupted over and over again. And if you don't believe that that would cause anxiety, just think about going home and having your home not there and not knowing where your family was, and then try that over and over and over again. So we have profound anxiety. That anxiety is often read as attention deficit disorder. It's read as aggressive acting out. It's read as a lot of things, but underlying it is anxiety. We also see aggression. We see serious aggression. And that aggression stems from, again, traumatization, witness of domestic violence, and chaotic homes that are unpredictable. So we do see aggressive behavior. And third, we see profound loneliness. And that loneliness then is interpreted and read as depression and becomes depression. And I'm not talking about the kind of depression that everyone feels transitionally. I'm talking about the kind of depression where you can't move. I'm talking about the kind of depression where you can't think, where you're frozen. So here's the good news, is that we do know some of the solutions for this. Can I do 4 instead of 5? I grew up with the 4 questions, not the 5 questions. So, to deal with anxiety, we have developed a suite of services that we call wraparound, but wraparound is really a lot of services. And those services can help stabilize chaotic homes, can create settings that are strong enough to provide the support kids and families need, and can contain a number of other services, including some of the ones that you're describing that are not traditional psychotherapy services. When we think about aggression, we have very good intervention techniques. And by the way, all wraparound in California should be trauma-informed. And we're making the shift to where our wraparound programs are deeply and well trauma-informed. But when we think about aggressive behaviors, aggression is actually a healthy reaction to some situations in life. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but if you need to save your life and aggression is your only choice, you better learn to be aggressive. And what we need to do is help teach youth alternative behaviors and through evidence-based practices like aggression replacement therapy, like cognitive behavioral therapy, that channel that aggressive energy towards more healthful solutions. And we know how to do that, and we have the therapies that can help do that, and we have the interventions that can help do that. And finally, loneliness, which is the most difficult and probably the most devastating. And yet, we haven't scaled family finding in California. We don't even know who all our kids' relatives are, where they are, how many of them would become a support network, because we've never scaled family finding. We've never scaled relative care to the place where we support relatives in a way that says we can make the decision to help support a youth in our extended family. So we have a suite of services that can ameliorate loneliness, and some of that is scaling the pool of highly effective and highly engaged foster parents. So as we look towards the solutions, and I'm clearly getting to my 4 minutes.
And I'm gonna have to have you wrap it up in about a minute, and I apologize.
I'm going to wrap up in 30 seconds.
Okay, I apologize.
We need a suite of crisis services that allow for immediate intervention. No youth in psychiatric crisis should ever go to a physical health emergency room. There should be places in every county. Alameda, Santa Clara have led the way in providing these kinds of services, and those services should link to services that might be able to intervene without medication. We should scale. We have all of the services that I described to you. In no case in the state of California have those services been scaled to the place where they're on demand for children and youth that need them. Linthal said it earlier. The only service that can reliably be available to every foster youth in California is medication. And when the only tool you have is a hammer, and I'll end there. Thank you.